Let's talk about being prepared. Aren't you ready for life to get back to normal? I know I am, but there's one thing none of us can afford to ignore. Another crisis can happen at any time without warning. But this time you can have peace of mind knowing you're prepared in advance for whatever happens. So ask yourself, do you have enough food, water, emergency supplies to get through the next time? If not, you need to check out My Patriot Supply. They're America's leading preparedness company, and they'll help you become happily self-reliant. Their mission is your survival. Their food is delicious too and stays fresh up to 25 years, so it'll be there when you need it. You won't have to worry if something bad happens. You'll be well prepared. Order today and your food will be delivered in 2 to 3 days. Go to preparewithx22.com right now and do what you know you need to do. That's preparewithx22.com. Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a returning guest, Bill Holter. Bill is a financial writer, a gold expert. Bill also helps individuals purchase and store precious metals. He collaborates with Jim Sinclair on jsmindset.com. And I am very happy to have Bill back on the X22 Report Spotlight. Bill, welcome back to the Spotlight.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Hey, thanks for being here. And I just wanted to start off with the central bank, because the last time we spoke was right when the pandemic was starting and people didn't know what it was and the global economy was shut down. And since that time, the central bank, they've been printing like crazy. Actually, governments have been borrowing like crazy. And these funds now are going into the people's pockets compared to 2000, 2008, 2009, 2010, where a lot of the printing went into the banking system. This time it's going to the people. And the Fed, they're out there telling us that, no, don't worry about inflation. It's transitory, nothing to see here. I mean, what do you think is happening right now with all this stimulus and the Fed saying that inflation is transitory?
First off, 2008, 2009, you're correct. The funds mostly went into the financial system, into banks. And banks, it did not get into the main street system, so to speak. So it was more or less sterilized. This time it is going to Main Street, so it's not sterilized. And you're seeing that money being spent. It's being spent on goods that, because of production, distribution, etc., bottlenecks, there's less goods and there's more money chasing them, so you're seeing prices rise. What's interesting now is that the central banks have pushed so much money into the system. I don't know whether you followed this or not, but the reverse repo market last week and the week before had 3 of the 5 highest daily uses ever. And the reason being, banks, for regulatory reasons, they really cannot accept more cash coming in. They're actually turning deposits away. And the problem is, with all this money coming in, the danger is that rates actually do go negative. And when I say danger, the reason that's a danger is because the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. And if you have a negative interest rate on the reserve currency of the world, basically what that illustrates is that the money's worth zero. I mean, think about the logic behind, you lend money, but you got to pay the borrower. And we talked about this a couple, 3, 4 years ago when rates started to go negative in various parts of the world. But now the threat is that rates go negative on the short end in the U.S. And that basically tells you that the money's not worth anything.
So can the central bank actually raise rates? Because they've been talking about maybe they can raise rates because of the inflation that we're seeing that's only transitory.
Well, they can raise rates if they want. The danger on the downside is that rates go negative. The danger on the upside is that rates start to go higher, and I believe they will go higher just as a function of risk premium, if you will, But if rates go higher, and we talked about this many times, Dave,
Mm-hmm.
the system now is so over levered that higher rates will create insolvencies. Higher rates will create bankruptcies. So yes, they can raise rates, but they will blow up the system doing it, because never has the world been this indebted on any, however you want to look at it, on a ratio, debt to GDP, debt to cash flow, debt to whatever. There's never been this much debt overhanging the entire system. And that's the problem, is that if you raise rates on that debt, you're going to bankrupt it.
Yes, I agree with that. And do you think that the central bankers, do you think they used the pandemic do you think they used it to cover up their implosion of their system? Because it seems that their plan was to have everyone stay home, everyone receive something like universal basic income, and have the government continually borrow and borrow and borrow and have the system completely implode. Do you think they used this pandemic for that purpose?
Let's go back to before the pandemic,
okay,
and what happened. Very importantly, if you go back to September 17th of 2019, that was the day that the repo, not the reverse repo, but the repo market blew up. Interest rates went from basically 1% to 10% overnight. And from that point forward, the Fed was having to pump up to $100 billion every single night into the system just to keep the overnight repos from collapsing. And understand that overnight repos, that's primarily used, I mean, it's obviously short term because it's overnight, but it's primarily used to run businesses. Whether it be inventory, what have you. The point being, the pandemic was actually fortuitous, if you will. The pandemic, what it did was it lessened, because the economies around the world were shutting down, that lessened it lessened the demand for credit. And as the demand for credit lessened, then the repo market, the pressure on the repo market was lifted. So it was good luck, fortuitous, whatever you want to call it, that happened when it did, because they had a problem with the credit markets, a big problem going into COVID. Now, what the central banks needed to do was print like crazy. And they couldn't really do that because the public would look at it and say, well, why? Everything's supposed to be so good. So what the pandemic did was it gave the central banks cover to do what they had to do to keep the financial system from falling apart.
So you think this was planned so they can save their system?
You're asking me, do I think it was planned? Dave, back in, what was it, August, September, October 2019, there were actually dry runs, tests of how would we deal with a pandemic. There were patents that were applied for prior to COVID even being known about. So was it planned? I mean, it's pretty obvious.
During this time, during the pandemic, Klaus Schwab came out and he released that this would be a perfect time for the Great Reset. And he mapped out a plan. And if you go back in time, they were saying that, there'd be no vaccines. We would be shut down for years upon years. But that didn't happen. We had a vaccine that was introduced to the public. It kind of countered everything that they were trying to do. Let's first talk about the Great Reset. Do you think the Great Reset is dead now?
I don't think it's dead, simply because we have to have a reset. but we believe there's going to be two resets. There's going to be a man-made reset, and ultimately, when that fails, a Mother Nature reset. I think the reset that's going to come is not going to look like what when I say they, I'm talking about the cabal, whatever you want to call them. I think that the reset is not going to be exactly as they had planned it. And the reason being, many things have happened over the last year. First off, the COVID, if you look at the statistics, the COVID deaths that they claim happened, what happened to the flu? What happened to heart attacks? What happened to diabetes? If you look at the total deaths in the U.S., there were really no more deaths last year than the previous 4 or 5 years.
Correct.
What happened was everything was classified as COVID. And I think, you've got a large portion of the population that have run out and gotten the vaccines. But what's happening now is that the vaccine passports that were going to be rolled out, those are pushed back. Way less people now are wearing masks. And some of the other things, as long as Manchin stands up to holding up the filibuster, that basically means that H.R. 1's not going to happen. It means D.C. is not going to become a state. The Supreme Court's not going to be packed. But last week or the week before, we got all those emails on Fauci. So now what we suspected, we know for a fact that Fauci was a fraud. And I think just look at the viewership on CNN, MSNBC. Those have crashed. So I think some sanity is starting to peek its head through.
Do you think America is waking up at this time and they're seeing everything for the first time and they're objecting to it?
Yeah, I think there is, and it's not the first time.
Mm-hmm.
People are not waking up for the first time. There have been some people awake all along, but I think more and more people are finding out that this whole thing was fraudulent and put together to create a reset.
So why do you think the emails for Fauci were leaked out? I mean, if the cabal is in control, why would they let this information out? Or maybe the cabal's not in control.
Maybe that's what I was going to say. Maybe they're not totally in control and they did get leaked out. It's like truth is slowly dripping out. And the more truth that drips out, the more and more skeptical people are going to become. I mean, just look at, if you look at what's going on with the Biden administration.
Right.
I mean, more and more people even people who voted for Biden are looking at this and going, hey, wait a minute. This isn't what I voted for. I didn't vote to open the borders. I didn't vote to defund the police. I didn't vote for Mad Max world. So
you think people are having buyer's remorse where they're saying, I shouldn't?
Yes, I do.
So let me just.
Yeah. And I mean, look at just one other thing I was going to say, just look at now you have various swing states in the process of, or seriously beginning the process of audits. And I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, the most obvious thing was just look at Trump's rallies and look at Biden's rallies where he couldn't get a dozen people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm convinced that it was a complete landslide for Trump, and the audits are gonna show that there was some really serious election fraud, and that Trump did win, in fact, by a huge landslide.
So let's just go down this path for a sec. So if the Arizona audit where they're doing a forensic audit, where they're not just recounting numbers. They're looking at the ballots. They're looking at the computer systems. They're looking at pretty much everything. If this information does come out and it shows that the Biden administration, they cheated, and it's just not Biden, let's talk about being prepared. Aren't you ready for life to get back to normal? I know I am, but there's one thing none of us can afford to ignore. Another crisis can happen at any time without warning. But this time you can have peace of mind knowing you're prepared in advance for whatever happens. So ask yourself, do you have enough food, water, emergency supplies to get through the next time? If not, you need to check out My Patriot Supply. They're America's leading preparedness company, and they'll help you become happily self-reliant. Their mission is your survival. Their food is delicious too and stays fresh up to 25 years, so it'll be there when you need it. You won't have to worry if something bad happens. You'll be well prepared. Order today and your food will be delivered in 2 to 3 days. Go to preparewithx22.com right now and do what you know you need to do. That's preparewithx22.com. Many other people that are involved with this, because think about the scope of all of this, of people on the ground who were manipulating the ballots or feeding in fake ballots. What happens when this is brought out to the public? I mean, is the deep state, are they just going to accept this and say, okay, you know what, we lost. Yes, you found us out, we cheated. Or do you think they're going to push some type of event to stop this?
Well, it's funny you say push some type of event. Just this month alone, and I'm obviously the Arizona audit should be done, in a week or 2 weeks.
Right.
Now, I don't know when they're going to release that, release the findings. But assuming they release the findings, let's use a date of July 1st. So it's the end of this month. So there's one. Another thing that's going on is you've got this Basel III, whether it's going to happen, whether it's not going to happen, which will expose the fraud in the paper gold market. And there's one other thing that's going on. There's a court case between architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth versus the NIST regarding Building 7. And of course, you haven't heard anything about that at all on the mainstream. I mean, you really have to dig to find that. But that is, that's coming up at the end of this month. So when you say event, can any of those things actually happen without, some type of a false flag being released, so to speak, prior?
Yeah, I think they're going to need a false flag to cover up all of this. Is that what you're saying?
Right. No, I was just going to say, yeah, obviously, none of those things can actually go forth without the system literally coming apart at the seams. So yeah they're going to have to distract. And it's got to be an awful big distraction. And when I say awful big, something bigger than 9/11.
Well, I don't know if you heard this, but the energy secretary, she was mentioning something about that there are cyber attack attempts on the power grid. And this was in I believe it was the New York Post, where she was explaining that, yes, they are vulnerable, just like the Colonial Pipeline, just like the JBS meat processing plant, just like everything else. So do you think they'll take this to the step where they'll try to shut down the grid? I mean, do you think they'll take it that far?
If they have to, absolutely. And by the way, for the Colonial Pipeline and also the meatpacking, as I understand it, the hack was not actually on the pipeline itself or the operation itself. It was just on their billing. So it was, from what I understand, it was shut down by the company. It was not shut down by hackers. And then last night, how many companies had their websites taken down? So, I mean, they're getting people ready for it so that it's not something that's totally out of the blue. It's like, they're gonna do this and do that, and 1 + 1 = 2, and 2 + 2 = 4, and bam, the Pope was given some type of forewarning, and gosh, who could have seen it coming? But you have no power.
Right.
Or you have no this, or you have no that, whatever.
Actually, this would also help them with their financial problems, because couldn't they use this to say that it wiped out the financial system, or you can't use the financial system?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the markets could crash. And Dave, you and I did an interview, I'm going to say it was probably 6 years ago, 2015 or 16. And I said, Dave, When this thing goes off the cliff, they're going to have something to point at to blame because their policies were going along absolutely perfect if it wasn't for this big bad boogeyman that just popped its head up. I don't know if you remember that or
Yes.
not, but I've been adamant on this all along is that they're going to have something to point at.
I agree with you. And yes, I remember that. We said this multiple times in the past. In the end, they're going to have some type of major event, so they can blame it on that. And I just want to go back for a sec. You mentioned Basel III, with gold and producing the fraud with gold. Can you expand on that? What will Basel III show the people about the fraud with gold?
Well, what Basel III does is it makes the banks have to come up with basically 85% of the capital that they're trading. So if they're trading $100 worth of gold, they have to actually have $85 on their books. I am still at the point of I don't know whether this is going to go through as it is or not go through. But I do want to caution people that there is one way around this for the central banks, so to speak, or the bullion banks. The central banks can step up and do, if you will, clandestine loans. So the central banks can actually fund that 85%. I mean, obviously they can't do that publicly,
Right.
but if they had to, they can probably do it in a backdoor manner. So I don't know whether Basel III is going to go through as it's written right now. It seemed to me a month ago or 6 weeks ago or whatever that you had the LBMA and World Gold Council protesting extremely loudly and violently. And I mean, my thought process was they're protesting too hard. What they're saying is, oh, you're going to blow the game up.
So, I mean,
in other words, they were admitting that it's a paper game and you can't stop the paper game. Otherwise, the whole rig is up. And when I say the whole rig is up, everything is rigged. Everything. The most important rig is the gold market because gold is the direct competitor to the dollar, to fiat currencies. And if gold were, if you were to wake up tomorrow morning and find gold at $3,000 and then 2 days later it's at 5, and then it's pushing at 10, and then it starts doing Bitcoin numbers, you'd have a total outright break in confidence of the paper system. And going one step further than gold is silver. And silver cannot be let loose because if silver runs, then gold will run. So silver being the smallest market, that's where the heaviest rig has been. And I was thinking about this last night. I may write an article on it that silver and gold are God's money. And I was thinking to myself, and I got to go check the passage, but if you recall in the Bible, Jesus kicked the money changers' tables over. Mm-hmm. And I think silver very well is the one that's going to do that. God's money will kick the entire table over by breaking the rig, which takes gold, and then confidence in paper breaks. Because what happens is the fractional reserve nature of the entire financial paper system will be exposed.
So I find it very interesting. I mean, we're talking about the gold and silver markets, and if we go back to 2000, I think it was 2011, gold hit around 1900 or so. And here we are, we're back at 1900 again. I mean, why would the central bankers allow gold to hit almost 1900? Actually, it went over 1900, but it's a little bit down now. Why would they allow this? Are they losing control?
Well, yeah, the bottom line is physical demand is outstripping physical supply. As a matter of fact, in silver, I don't think the U.S. Mint has shipped any Silver Eagles for a month or 6 weeks or somewhere in that time frame. The point being, the system itself has gotten so large. Is when I say the system, I'm talking about the amount of paper outstanding. Yet the amount of gold and silver outstanding only grow by what? Call it maybe 2% per year. That's the mine output. So the amount of above ground gold, above ground silver, and mine supply has not come anywhere close to keeping up with the paper system. As a matter of fact, you can look at it this way. Back in 2017, I did the math on what the price of gold would have to be if the U.S. had to pay off the debt in gold. And I came up at the time, I think it was like 70,000 an ounce. Then I did it again a year later, it was 87,000 an ounce. Now we're well over $100,000 an ounce. And what I'm trying to illustrate is that's because the amount of paper is expanding, the amount of debt is expanding exponentially, yet the amount of actual real physical metal is expanding at, like I said, roughly 2% per year.
So before you mentioned gold moving up, one day to 3,000, the next day to 5,000. I mean, if all this happens, do you think with gold moving up the way it is, gold, silver, it will basically destroy the Fed? Will people start to question the Fed?
It will. Yeah, absolutely. The Fed will be laid bare. And I think within a very short period of time after it begins, I think gold and silver will go into hiding. You will not be able to buy gold or silver for paper money. You'll be able to buy gold with silver. You'll be able to buy silver with gold. But who in their right mind, if the system's coming down, is going to give up gold or silver for paper dollars?
And nobody at that point.
Right. And the metal goes into hiding. And then it's purely a physical market, and it doesn't matter even if COMEX is still trading, which I doubt it. But even if they're still trading, those prices are completely meaningless.
So if that does happen and the system starts to fall apart and gold or silver go into hiding and you can't get any of it, what would be the currency? What would we move into? I mean,
very difficult to say.
Everyone doesn't have gold and silver, right? I mean, I do. I mean, I'm assuming you do, but
central banks do.
Right.
Most central banks have some gold. So what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to mark gold up to an astronomical number to back whatever the money supply was or whatever the new currency is.
So almost like the numbers that we're seeing in Bitcoin right now, or maybe even higher than that.
Right, exactly. I mean, think about this, Dave, and I don't know what your thoughts are on Bitcoin or cryptos or whatever. Mm-hmm. My personal opinion is you're looking at digital air, and if you can mark digital air up to $65,000 an ounce or $65,000 a unit,
right?
What will the price of gold be, which is something absolutely real, has been real money for 5,000 years, and you can hold in your hand, and doesn't get completely blown away in an internet down scenario.
Yeah, it would go much, much higher. We're talking about something that's been around for thousands upon thousands of years. Say that again?
Yeah, and basically, and adding zeros to its price.
Yes.
Until you get to an equilibrium price where people are willing to liquidate gold for whatever this new gold-backed, silver-backed currency is.
So you think that coming out of this...
One other thing.
Sure.
Just go back to 1934,
mm-hmm.
when right after gold had been confiscated, what did they do? They marked the price of gold up. Why did they do that? Because the Treasury basically rebooted their balance sheet. They increased their balance sheet. They took gold in, and then they increased the value of that by 70% in dollar terms. So basically what that did was it supported the dollar.
At this point, as gold is, I guess, recalculated and silver is recalculated, you think that the system would be backed by gold and silver?
In some ratio form. I don't think we'll ever see a fully gold-backed currency again or silver-backed currency. But yeah, I think we will see countries ratio back their currency. And, there may be a race. One does it at 25%, another does it at 30, another does it at 40. I don't think you'll ever get to see 80%, 100% backing.
Right. Wow.
But the point being, they're going to have to do something to create confidence in whatever currencies or new currencies that they come up with. They've got to create confidence, otherwise it won't be accepted.
Right. And I think that's what it's all about. It's about confidence, showing people, don't worry, this is stable. We have it. Don't worry about it.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So when we're looking at this, I mean, I don't want to lock you down on a time frame, but as things continue on the way they are with Biden in the White House, with the central bankers continually pushing their agenda of the Great Reset, and governments are continually borrowing. I mean, will this go on for another 10, 20 years? Or do you think with gold moving up the way it is now, that things are already starting to break down for them?
Yeah, no, the process has already started. You're already seeing, you've already seen the physical price of metal begin to diverge from the COMEX and LBMA prices. Mm. So that's already happening. I mean, look at U.S. Silver Eagles. You're talking, $38, $40 an ounce, yet COMEX says silver's $27.50 or $28. Which one's right?
Right.
And I'm going to tell you the one where you can actually get real silver in your hand. That's the price. So it's already starting to break down.
Yeah, I agree with you. Hey, Bill, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people get in touch with you and see your work?
You can go to www.jsmineset.com.
Great. I'll put all the links at the bottom of the video. Once again, Bill, thank you very much for being on the Spotlight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.